Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Beta FPV Meteor65. Just this morning it looked like this outside, and it kind of brought some sadness. It was the second storm. Many of you have experienced these things as well, and it's kind of whoop season now as we try to stay warm. And this is the latest entry into that market. Let's take a look. The Beta FPV Meteor65 features an F4 1S brushless flight controller and ESC combination. This is the 2.1 version. That's our bind button right there. The new BT 2.0 connector. The limit on this connector, as reported, is 9 amps. Features the Beta FPV 0802 22,000 kV motors. Featuring Beta FPV 3-bladed 31mm props. The camera also Beta FPV, labeled as the M01 all-in-one. It's actually a separate camera in VTX. VTX is 25 milliwatt on this one. Motor post to motor post, it does look like 65 millimeters. Motor shafts look like 1 millimeter. It weighs just over 23 grams. With the included battery, it weighs about 31.5 grams. It does come with two 1S 300 milliamp batteries, an extra set of props, and a second camera mount. Here's a close-up shot of the BT2 and the PH2 connectors. Because this only shipped with 2 batteries and I don't have any others that can connect it, it doesn't come with an adapter for the PH20 or anything like that. You're going to get to see me fly when I'm not really warmed up or prepared. I don't have the time to fly and then charge and then refly, so I'd fly it twice and then I would record those flights and then I would charge at nighttime. I'd fly it 2 more times before I went to bed, and I wouldn't record those flights because they'd mainly just be down in the basement. And then the next day over my lunch hour, I'd then fly again. I would say at this point I probably have close to 25 flights on it, so you'll get to see me fly. And it's a little bit rough. We're going to have a crash here at about, I think it comes up just under a minute down in the basement. For those of you that aren't familiar, I fly these brushless whoops in acro mode. I'm actually really bad at flying in stability and angle mode now. I've just been doing acro for so long that I'm just terrible at all the others. And for those that aren't familiar, acro mode means that you have to control all the axis. The flight controller is not doing any of the self-stabilization. Yeah, you got to see that little crash there, and we took right off. I will show you in a picture-in-picture back at the desk. It does turtle mode just fine. Better front to back than side to side. But that's a little detail. Also, you might notice a little snap or a jerk every once in a while. I kind of want to blame that on the tune, but I think it's actually the props getting loose, because I noticed in more flights as I kind of banged up these props that especially when I would get on the throttle very hard, that I would tend to get more of those little snaps. And I think it's the motor spinning up trying to get the prop to keep the motor in place as the flight controller expects it, and it slips and it speeds up until it gets there. And I think that's what the snap is. It might not be, but that's my diagnosis as of right now. I was going to fly it on some different props, but I kind of thought that would change things a little bit. I'd like to keep it on these props. It's how it was shipped to me. But I do think other props will tend to stay on a little bit better. Of course, there's a host of props out that you can try out that come from all the different usual players in the space that you would expect to see. They're all relatively cheap, and you can get them for a few dollars, plus some shipping, of course. And you usually get a pack of at least a set, if not 2 sets or 10 in a pack of these 31mm props. The camera I thought was pretty good. I thought the reception on 25 milliwatts was actually pretty good as well. The last time you may have seen me fly a brushless whoop in the house would have been the Beta 85 Pro 2, and that one I was running at 200 milliwatts, so that can give you a little bit of a reception comparison. Of course, I have an open floor plan in my house, and I found that sitting right at that spot that I'm at the table gives me the best possible reception. And as we land, I'm going to hit that centerpiece and fall all the way to the floor. Oh, I could have flown longer. The video, as you've seen it so far, that's my original review video. And after rendering it out and doing some proof reviewing, I decided I needed to go back and test the prop theory. And what I found is I used these newbie drone props that you see, the Z props, and they were the only props that I had that are 31 millimeters and would fit on that. And that's the point that I wanted to make, not only in my diagnosis of the snaps being from the props loosening up, but that I found that not all props fit on this. And I've got a stack of props. I don't have a lot, but I thought I would bring out the rack-on heli props fit on, but they felt loose, more loose than the original props. The HQ props, these might fit. These others that I might show you, they might fit, but I had to press on them pretty hard, and I felt like they weren't really starting, so I wanted to back off. I didn't want to ruin the motors by trying to press on props that didn't feel like they fit. So I tried these HQs. These were some generics that I had in the bin. They also didn't feel like they were going on. Some of the original Beta FPV props, they didn't feel like they were going on. These, I don't know who they're made by, but you know, I had these in the bin, so if you have some of these, these also didn't feel like they were going on. So my diagnosis that it was from loose props causing the snaps that we would see in the flight footage, that is not accurate. I don't know what is causing that, but I did see it in pretty much all of my flight footage. I went back through all the DVRs. I did find that the snaps and the pops, or whatever you call those little changes in flight characteristics that were very, very momentary, did exist across the board. So I don't know what that is from. It could be just my particular unit, but it was consistent. Now on with the rest of my original review. So I mentioned it in the quick roll, these new BT2 connectors, I really like how smooth they come on and off. I have found the PH20 connectors to sometimes be problematic, especially if you don't have much in fingernails to get a hold of them to pull them out. I don't like pulling things out by the wires. I want to get a hold of the connector and pull it out, and these come apart and go together much smoother. Of course, that could mean that they come apart in flight, although in my flight time with all my banging around, I didn't have any troubles with it. So just on that physicality of connecting the batteries to the battery lead on the machine, I do like these connectors. The reported amp draw, or the ability to carry amps, is reported to be 9 amps, so that's twice what we'd see in a good PH20 connector. So there could be a benefit clear up to a 2S whoop, but we'll have to see how that develops. I noticed on the Beta FPV website they do have all sorts of different leads and connectors, so we could make an adapter of our own, and they may come out with an adapter to connect our traditional batteries. These are actually some new GNB batteries, but connect this style of battery to this style of connector, so we can either transition our batteries or we can just make an adapter. Of course, in my typical style, I've beat this thing up and I've cracked the canopy a couple different ways. You could use some welder on it before you start to kind of coat the canopy, maybe on the outside or the inside, depends on what you want to do. That will help keep it together. You can use E6000. Another good tip that I got on the Beta 85 Pro 2 was to double layer the canopies, but in little ones like this, I would say that adds maybe a half a gram, maybe 0.7 grams to the quad, and you may notice that in flight. So it's there. It's an option that's been suggested. I think it's better served on larger ones than smaller ones, but it's something that you can do. As far as these props go, I did mention it in the flight that I think they were coming loose. They come on and off with relatively ease, and I did report that to Beta FPV that I think either the holes need to be just a slightly a 0.1 or 0.05 smaller, so they press on a little bit tighter, and so when you make impacts and you kind of move the prop around, that hole will stay true. I went through all the props, and they've all pretty much done it. Here you can take a look at the inside of the prop to see how it's designed, to see what you think of it. I don't mind the prop shape or anything. It's hard to tell if it's very efficient or not because I've only got the one battery. I've got, well, the 2 batteries, excuse me, and I can't really measure the flight time versus any of the other batteries that have the typical connector on them. So that's something I just can't give you even an opinion on it because I've got nothing else to compare it to with this sort of connector. Also on the frame, you'll notice that it looks to be painted. I did ask this question about whether it's going to be painted in production or not because I'm told this is pre-production. And I don't know if something was lost in communication, but they indicated that yes, it's going to be painted. I sent them pictures of this and how the paint is kind of chipping off. I don't know if that's something they're concerned about or something you're concerned about, but it's something that I thought I should bring to note. This does appear to be a new mold, if you can tell by these struts and how they're formed. I don't believe I've seen a Beta FPV frame with this sort of mold on these struts. You can see how they come up through the hoop section a little bit. You're getting a good shot of those motors. Also, the motors do come with bearings. I don't have one to take apart to show you, but there were some pictures, I think, posted by Nate Payne, Mr. Shutterbug, online where he showed the bearing. He's got a set of motors, I believe, and you can also see that PCB that's down there right above my fingernail. The motor wires are soldered to that. So by chance, if you were flying this outside, which these things don't necessarily fly good outside, but I understand, you know, if you're got a nice day, you want to jump outside and you snag a motor wire and it happens to pull it loose. I do think these have been reinforced, but it should make it a lot easier to solder another connector back to that PCB rather than having to solder to the wire itself inside the motor. You do see right there on the bottom, we've got Phillips headed screws. I'm not a fan of that, but when it comes to these 65mm whoops, weight is so important that you got to do everything you can to keep them down. I would even say that this lead is a touch long. We could probably take a small section of this out and we would be fine, but I understand that if you just put the battery in Let me put one in for you here so you can see. You do have to shove it all the way forward and then connect it, and you can push it back to center your battery bit. So it's kind of the right size for that, but you could shift it forward with a little forward bias in your battery, which is typical, and then you have a little bit of excess you've got there. There's a host of color options you can get. I'm currently only seeing frames as different color options. Of course, these canopies, you can buy these canopies all over the place. I think you can see them on Amazon, Beta FPV. You can probably get replacements off of RDQ and Pyro Drone and Good Venture Drones and RotorGeeks and Rotor Village and all sorts of different places. I mentioned some of those Canadian companies because our friends up north are probably soaking in the snow. But I'm seeing orange, black, blue, of course, green, white. I thought I saw a pink as well. That might not be ready just yet. I do see that the frame is only coming in at $5 or $4.99 to be more specific, and then the quad itself is coming in at $109.99 for the FrSky version. Of course, you can get Futaba DSMX, or you can get it to where you put your own receiver on it as well. And if you are curious, Beta FPV does show, as I mentioned, the pigtails, the adapter cables they have on their website. It looks like you get a set of 6 adapter cables, which you probably need those for charging, are $8 or $7.99, and then they also have pigtails that don't have a second end on them that you get 6 of those as well for $7.99. They do also have a battery checker, and in my flight footage I run the battery down just about as far as I could because I wanted to see how resilient these batteries are going to be. Are they going to puff if I run them like that over the course of 20 or so packs? And then I could report that as well. So you might not want to set your battery voltage or your warning on your OSD like I did, because I wanted to run this thing way down. And I did find that once it got down to about 3 volts per cell, or 3 volts in the cell, that I pretty much had to land. But if I disarmed for maybe 5 seconds, I could then rearm and I had a short burst of flight. Typically, I would just fly myself right back to the table. And again, as I mentioned, they also have the connectors that you can buy if you wanted to transition your batteries over to the BT2 connector, or if you wanted to run your PH2 batteries on this quad. I'll have a link down in the description to the Meteor65 page, which not only lists this, but also some of the other products, batteries, connectors, pigtails, battery checkers, frames, all those things down in the video description below. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.